AITA for not disclosing to my housemates that my family has money and refusing to pay more monthly. Now they want me to pay all the rent and grocery bills. I am a 23-year-old woman, and for the past 3 years, I have been living with 7 other people in a big rented house just outside the city center. It started when we were all in university together, 2 girls and 5 guys, including my boyfriend, and what was supposed to be a temporary solution turned into a pretty comfortable situation. None of us wanted to deal with the horror show that is the local rental market, and honestly, we all enjoyed having roommates, at least enough to make it work. We split everything, rent, utilities, cleaning supplies, totally equally. There was never any discussion about people paying more or less, and for the most part, it worked out just fine. We were not all super close, but we got along well enough. We had parties together, we traveled once or twice a year as a group, we had movie nights and birthday dinners. It was a mix of friendships, casual acquaintances, and a few deeper bonds like mine with my boyfriend, obviously, and Maria, one of the other girls. Everything was running smoothly until about 3 weeks ago, when something that started as a dumb drunk joke spiraled into a huge, uncomfortable mess. It happened during one of our regular weekend parties. We had a bunch of people over, but around 2 in the morning, it was just us housemates sitting around the fire pit in the backyard, slightly tipsy and swapping embarrassing childhood stories. Someone mentioned school drama, and without thinking much, I laughed and said that nothing beat the nightmare of going to a very elite private school where they cared more about dress code violations than actual education. That comment caught Jay completely off guard. Jay, one of the guys in the house, 25 years old, immediately latched onto that. He started asking a bunch of questions about the school, the uniforms, the tuition. I answered casually, not really seeing where it was going, and he finally leaned back and said, half joking, half accusing, "Wow, you are rich." Everyone kind of laughed it off, including me, and we moved on to talking about terrible cafeteria food or something equally silly. It felt like a nothing moment. The next morning, though, Jay would not let it go. He kept making these comments about how he should bow to my royal presence, or pretending to get out of my way dramatically in the kitchen, saying things like, "Let the rich girl through." At first, I laughed along. We all roasted each other constantly. It was normal. But after the 3rd day of it, breakfast, lunch, dinner, every single time we crossed paths, it started to wear on everyone, not just me. Maria eventually told him to chill. She said it half joking, but there was an edge to it, and Jay immediately got defensive. He started ranting about how he did not realize we were living with a secret millionaire and how it changed things. I tried to laugh it off, but it became clear really fast that he was serious. There we were, sitting around the breakfast bar, and suddenly it turned into a full-blown serious conversation. Jay said he felt betrayed because he had assumed that all of us were struggling more or less equally, and that knowing I came from money made him feel like I should have been paying more this whole time. He threw out a number, $1,800 a month, and said that would be more fair compared to what everyone else was paying. I was completely caught off guard. I told him, as calmly as I could, that while my parents were comfortable, I was not sitting on a mountain of cash. I had a decent job, but I was paying for my own rent, my own utilities, my own groceries. I was not getting a monthly allowance. My parents helped with school, but now I was on my own. I said I simply could not afford to pay almost double what everyone else was paying. Jay did not take it well. He accused me of being a liar by omission, saying that I had hid my background to trick everyone. My boyfriend got involved at that point, defending me and pointing out that nobody ever agreed that richer people should pay more. It had never been part of our arrangement. It had always been equal shares, from day one. Jay stormed out of the kitchen, saying over his shoulder that I was a fake friend and a liar. It was humiliating. The worst part was that it was not just an argument, it shifted the vibe of the whole house. Over the next few days, it became obvious that nobody else agreed with him. Maria and my boyfriend were firmly on my side from the start. Another housemate, Luke, said he thought Jay was being immature and jealous. Even Tom, who usually stays out of drama entirely, said that it was ridiculous to expect me to backpay a different amount just because of my parents' money. But even though everyone backed me up, the tension was there. Jay kept to himself. He barely spoke to anyone, and when he did, it was short and stiff. Group dinners felt awkward. Movie nights were weird because nobody wanted to invite Jay but also nobody wanted to exclude him completely. I spent a lot of time turning it over in my head. I never lied. I never pretended to be poor. I just avoided bringing up my background. In the beginning, when we all first moved in, there were so many conversations about money, rent, splitting bills, who was buying communal furniture, and I had felt so uncomfortable talking about how different my upbringing was. Everyone else talked about working through school, about cheap apartments they grew up in, about parents who struggled. My parents had been stable, supportive, had helped me get through university without debt. I felt like if I had been upfront, it would have made me other from the start. It was easier to just not mention it unless someone asked directly, and honestly, nobody ever did. Some of the group had figured it out on their own. Maria knew. My boyfriend knew, obviously. I think Luke knew too. They just did not care because they judged me on how I acted, not where I came from. But now I cannot stop wondering if Jay has a point. Not about the money, I genuinely cannot afford to pay almost $2,000 a month on top of all my other expenses, but about the feeling of betrayal. Maybe I should have said something earlier. Maybe I should have trusted my friends more instead of assuming they would treat me differently. At the same time, though, I cannot shake the feeling that Jay is making this into something it is not. His reaction feels more like resentment than real hurt. Like he needed an excuse to lash out and found one in this revelation. The rest of the house sees it too, I think. Nobody has asked me to change how much I pay. Nobody thinks I owe anything extra. Now it has been about a week since the big blow-up, and things are still weird. Jay is definitely sidelined. Not totally excluded, but left out of casual hangouts, not really included in conversations. He seems to realize it, but he has not apologized. I do not know if he ever will. I keep trying to tell myself that I am not the bad guy here. That I lived authentically, that I made real friendships, that if Jay cannot see me as a full person because of where I went to high school, that is on him, not me. Still, it sucks that something so stupid could cause so much damage to what used to feel like such an easy, comfortable living situation. And it sucks even more that even though everyone says I did nothing wrong, I still feel guilty. Update 1. I wish I could say things cooled off after that initial fight, but they did not. If anything, Jay doubled down. It started small, just little passive-aggressive comments when we would go on grocery runs together. Every time we split costs for shared household essentials like paper towels, laundry detergent, or toilet paper, Jay would make a big show of saying loudly, "Well, some people should really be footing more of the bill, but whatever, I guess we all have to suffer." The first couple of times, people just kind of ignored him, rolled their eyes, laughed awkwardly. But I noticed it did something, it planted a seed. Whenever Jay got an opening, he would have these quiet side conversations with the guys. Luke, who had originally said Jay was acting immaturely, suddenly started making these offhand comments that sounded suspiciously like he was coming around to Jay's point of view. Tom, who usually prided himself on being the chill one, began saying that he was just being practical about things, that it was not about punishing anyone, it was just about being fair. Even Chris, who technically did not even live with us but was basically a permanent fixture because he was friends with my boyfriend, got roped in. Chris would laugh and nudge Jay whenever he made one of his rich girl comments, feeding the whole toxic energy. The shift in the house was subtle at first, but once I noticed it, I could not unsee it. Group dinners felt different. People stopped asking me to help plan trips or split costs for things. They just kind of expected it now. Maria, who had been so solidly in my corner at the start, started hesitating. She was not against me, but she kept gently suggesting that maybe if I just paid a little more toward shared stuff, it would smooth things over. She said things like, "It does not have to be a big thing, just something to help move past all the tension." I felt completely cornered. It was not just that Jay was upset, he was organizing a full-on mutiny. Every single day it felt like the ground shifted a little more under my feet. I tried to stand my ground. I reminded everyone, repeatedly, that our original agreement when we moved in together was equal shares, no matter what. That was the deal. No one had complained when Tom got a huge promotion at work last year. No one cared that Luke's girlfriend came into money and spoiled him constantly. It had never mattered before. But Jay would not let it go. He started pushing harder. At one of our painfully awkward house meetings, he actually suggested that not only should I be paying a bigger share of the rent, but I should also cover the next few months' worth of groceries, as a goodwill gesture to make up for deceiving everyone. He said it so casually, like it was just the obvious, reasonable thing to do, like it was some sort of logical consequence for simply existing with the wrong kind of background. It was outrageous. I could not believe anyone would even entertain the idea. Yet somehow, after weeks of Jay's constant jabs, after endless little side conversations and quiet resentments building up, the idea started gaining traction. Luke said it would only be fair. Tom said it would help keep the peace. Chris, who again, did not even live there, said he thought it was the least I could do. Even Maria looked uncomfortable but did not immediately shoot it down. I wanted to scream. I felt completely isolated in a house full of people I had trusted. It did not matter that I had paid my share on time every single month. It did not matter that I cooked for the house when we had friends over, that I cleaned up after everyone's parties, that I had treated them like friends. None of that mattered anymore because I had gone to a fancy high school and my parents had master's degrees. That was now the only thing they could see when they looked at me. It bled into everything. Grocery trips became tense, with Jay tossing in extras and then glancing at me like it was my job to cover it. House chores became a battlefield, with Jay muttering about how some people think they are above scrubbing toilets. Even little things, like picking a movie for movie night, turned into a referendum on whether I was too fancy to enjoy a dumb comedy. I was constantly walking on eggshells. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, every time I said that the agreement had been equal shares from the start, that I was not secretly hoarding trust fund money, it was twisted into more evidence that I was selfish or out of touch. I stopped eating meals with the house because I could not stand the looks. I spent more time in my room with my boyfriend, who was still firmly on my side but just as exhausted as I was. The worst part was the betrayal. These were people I had trusted enough to build a home with. I had imagined celebrating promotions, engagements, even maybe buying a house someday with some of them still in my life. Now it felt like they had decided I was the villain, not because of anything I did, but because of something I was born into. I spent nights lying awake, wondering how it had gotten this bad. Wondering if I should just break my lease and move out. Wondering if I could ever feel comfortable living there again even if Jay magically decided to back off. Every shared meal, every trip to Costco, every movie night became a reminder that I had to pay more, that I was expected to make up for existing differently. I was exhausted from defending myself constantly. Update 2. If you thought that was the end, buckle up. About a week after the house really started to fracture, when I thought the worst of it was the cold shoulders and petty comments, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a second but answered. I should have let it go to voicemail. The woman on the other end introduced herself in this clipped, formal tone that immediately set my teeth on edge. She said she was Jay's mother, and without even pausing, she launched into a tirade about how disappointed she was in me. Her words were sharp and rehearsed, like she had been waiting for this moment. She said she had raised her son to believe in fairness and hard work, that she was horrified that someone like me, someone who had every advantage handed to her, would take advantage of hard-working young people who were just trying to get by. I stood there, frozen in my kitchen, listening to this complete stranger tear me apart based on whatever half-truths and outright lies Jay had fed her. I had never met Jay's parents. They did not know a thing about me beyond whatever Jay had told them, but she spoke like she had me all figured out, the spoiled little rich girl exploiting the noble working-class kids for my own amusement. I tried to stay calm. I explained politely, as clearly as I could, that we had always split rent and expenses equally, that everyone had agreed to it from the very beginning, and that it had never been an issue until Jay made it one. She did not care. She interrupted me before I could finish, saying that it was not about what had been written down but about what was right. She said that if I had any decency at all, I would stop hiding behind contracts and do the right thing by paying more. I was shaking with rage by the time I hung up. It was not just that Jay had twisted the story to his parents, it was that he had decided to escalate it, to weaponize his own family against me like I was some villain in his personal sob story. I went straight to Maria and my boyfriend and told them what had happened. They were both furious on my behalf. Maria immediately texted Jay, laying into him for involving his parents in house business. She told him flat out that it was way out of line. Jay replied back, smugly from what I could tell, that he was only fighting for what's fair, and that if I had nothing to be ashamed of, I would not mind answering for my actions. That night, after a tense few hours where nobody really knew what to do, we called a full house meeting. Everyone had to be there, no excuses. We gathered in the living room around 8 o'clock. No drinks, no snacks, no pretending this was casual. The atmosphere was heavy. Even Chris was there, sitting awkwardly on the arm of one of the couches, like he knew he was in too deep now to pretend it was not his problem too. Jay wasted no time. He launched into a long-winded speech about social contracts and moral obligations. He talked about unspoken agreements between friends and housemates, about how privilege came with responsibility, and how it was immoral for someone who could afford more to sit back and let others struggle equally. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes from rehearsing your talking points over and over again in the mirror. He looked around the room like he expected to see everyone nodding along in agreement. I waited until he finished. I waited through every smug, self-righteous word. Then I pulled out my laptop. I opened the original roommate agreement we had drafted 3 years ago when we first decided to rent the house together. It was nothing formal, just a simple document we had all written and signed to avoid future misunderstandings. I read it out loud. Every sentence, every line about equal splits for rent and utilities, every note about fairness and simplicity, without reference to personal wealth or parental backgrounds. I reminded everyone that at no point had anyone suggested income-based splits. That we had all agreed, explicitly, to avoid exactly this kind of drama. I pointed out that if Jay had felt so strongly about income-based rent, he had had 3 years to bring it up, and that targeting me specifically now was not about fairness, it was about resentment. It was a brutal 2 hours. There was a lot of back and forth. Luke looked uncomfortable but ultimately agreed that changing the deal mid-lease was unfair. Tom mumbled something about practicality but admitted that we had made a clear agreement at the start. Maria, to her credit, was vocal and firm. She said that Jay had crossed too many lines and that she did not trust him to act in good faith anymore. My boyfriend did not hold back. He flat out called Jay a bully in front of everyone, said that Jay was using guilt and group pressure to get what he wanted instead of handling his own financial situation like an adult. In the end, the decision was clear. No, I did not owe anything more than what I had already been paying. The house agreement stood. Equal splits, just like it had always been. If anyone felt they could not live with that, they were welcome to finish out the lease and leave when it ended in 4 months. No hard feelings. No grudges. But the terms would not be rewritten just because Jay was throwing a tantrum. Jay did not argue. He just sat there, his jaw clenched so tightly that I could see the muscles twitching. His face was a dark, ugly shade of red. When the meeting officially ended, and everyone started shifting uncomfortably in their seats, looking for a way to escape the tension, Jay stood up stiffly without a word. He did not look at me, or Maria, or anyone else. He just got up and left the room. Update 3. In the weeks following our house meeting, things were tense. Even though the decision had been made and everyone agreed to stick to the original equal split, it was obvious that the wounds were still fresh. Jay did not back down immediately. He was quieter than before, but he still managed to slip in a few passive-aggressive comments here and there. He would mutter under his breath about how some people had it easier or roll his eyes dramatically whenever we were splitting up costs for shared household items like dish soap or toilet paper. It was not direct confrontation anymore, it was smaller, more insidious digs meant to make sure everyone knew he had not really let it go. If anyone so much as mentioned the conflict, Jay doubled down, insisting that he had only ever been standing up for fairness. He framed himself as the one who had been brave enough to say what everyone else was thinking. It was exhausting. Even though the group as a whole had moved on, his presence kept the air stiff and uncomfortable. At first, I tried to pretend it wasn't happening. I focused on the people who had supported me, spent more time with Maria, my boyfriend, and the housemates who had stayed neutral or stuck by the original agreement. I filled my days with work and my nights with anything that kept me busy, cooking, watching shows with Maria, working out, anything to avoid sitting in the living room listening to Jay's muttered jabs. I told myself it would blow over eventually. I refused to let him take up any more space in my mind than he already had. And then, something surprising started to happen. It was subtle at first. About 3 or 4 weeks after the house meeting, Jay's attitude began to shift. The snide comments became less frequent. He stopped pointedly rolling his eyes every time group expenses came up. One evening, when we were organizing the week's grocery list, Jay actually volunteered to take charge of the Costco run. It was the first time he had offered to help with something in months. I half expected some kind of sarcastic remark to follow, but it never came. It was not an instant magical fix. I still felt guarded around him. I did not fully trust that this was not some kind of ploy to look better in front of the others. But little by little, Jay seemed to realize that digging in his heels was not helping him. It was just isolating him from the people he had spent years building friendships with. Whatever conversations were happening behind closed doors, whether someone had pulled him aside and told him to knock it off or whether he just finally looked around and saw how much distance he had created, something changed. One night, a few weeks after he started behaving more normally, we were all sitting around the living room playing card games. It felt almost like old times, everyone laughing, teasing each other about losing hands, fighting over who got the last slice of pizza. I cracked a dumb joke about Maria's over-the-top victory dance, fully expecting Jay to either ignore it or twist it into something cutting. Instead, he actually laughed. Not a sarcastic huff, not a forced, awkward chuckle, real, genuine laughter. He smiled, shook his head like he could not believe he was laughing at my joke, and then just moved on. It sounds so small, but it felt huge. Later that night, as everyone was cleaning up and scattering off to bed, Jay pulled me aside. It was awkward, so awkward that for a second I thought he was going to start a fight again. Instead, he looked uncomfortable, shoved his hands in his pockets, and apologized. It was not some grand, sweeping apology filled with all the right words, but it was real. He admitted that he had let his resentment cloud his judgment. He said he had made things way bigger than they needed to be. He admitted that he had hurt people he actually cared about, and he was sorry for dragging it out for so long. I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. I could have rubbed it in. I could have demanded a bigger apology, one that matched the weeks of tension and frustration and feeling like a villain in my own home. But honestly, by then, I was just tired. I wanted peace more than I wanted vindication. I accepted his apology. Since then, things have been good. Not perfect, Jay and I are not suddenly best friends. There is still a little bit of distance between us that was not there before, and I think that is okay. Some things heal with time and some things just settle into a new normal. But good. We function like a house again. Grocery runs feel normal. Group dinners are relaxed. Movie nights are easy, not filled with that electric undercurrent of tension where everyone is waiting for someone to snap. Jay participates without dominating conversations. He laughs and jokes without weaponizing it. It is not forced or fake, it is just lighter. Looking back, the whole situation taught me something important. Sometimes people lash out not because of anything you have done but because of what they are wrestling with inside themselves. Jay was dealing with his own insecurities, his own fears about money and fairness and what he thought was right. That did not make what he did okay. It did not mean I owed him extra money or endless patience. But it did mean I could recognize that his anger was not truly about me. I am proud that I stood my ground. Proud that I refused to let guilt or peer pressure rewrite the agreements we had all made together. I am also proud that when the opportunity came to make peace, I took it. I set my boundaries and defended them, but I left the door open for reconciliation when it was genuinely offered. The house feels like home again. And for that, I am really grateful.